Hello, welcome to the Days of Our Cyber Lives, a podcast series brought to you by the Indiana Bond Bank and the Treasurer of State of Indiana as part of the Indiana Bond Bank's overall Bondcast. My name is Mark Wuellner. I am the Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, and I am so pleased to be joined today by Treasurer of the State of Indiana, the Honorable Kelly Mitchell. Good to see you again, Kelly.
Hey, Mark. Great to see you.
It is great to see you as well, and excited about our episode today. We want to share again that the Bond Bank's mission, the reason we exist, is to connect local governments from schools to cities to counties and more to all sorts of kind of resources that help them achieve their financial goals. And as I've traveled the state in my role, I've heard from many of you firsthand about how cyber threats keep you up at night. You can do everything right. There could be one bad actor or one wrong link clicked, and it can wreak havoc on your entire system, your entire local unit of government. And so for our team at the Bond Bank, really this podcast series is just one really easy way that we can connect you with some resources and experts and tips and tricks to help navigate what's a very fuzzy world of cybersecurity.
Absolutely, Mark. I agree. I have a little bit of a unique perspective or multiple perspectives on cybersecurity. I've, of course, seen it in the early stages when I served as a Cass County Commissioner. And the image of the hacker for all of us was always the guy in his parents' basement, just seeing, what he could do. But at a state level, with the responsibility to serve as fiduciary for the state's monies, part of my duty is definitely to protect our funds from misappropriation by bad cyber actors. And I have a national perspective on cyber threats on two fronts. I have recently completed my master's studies at the U.S. Army War College, where we learned a great deal about how seriously cyber threats impact our national security. And in the local government space, I'm the incoming president of the National Association of State Treasurers, which gives me kind of a 50-state perspective on common issues and best practices that we all face. And Mark, the issues are deep and complex, and one of the reasons I'm so excited about co-hosting this Days of Our Cyber Lives podcast is that we're doing what researchers say is effective, connecting our constituents with easy to implement resources.
That's perfectly said, and I'm so honored to be joined by someone with that. You just have the depth and the breadth of knowledge and the perspective that you bring. I think it's made this Days of Our Cyber Lives series really, really fun and interesting. And if this is your first, please go back and listen or watch some of the previous episodes, because as we've learned, there's no magic bullet with cyber. Unfortunately, it's not just, you can't just set it and forget it. It's a series of small acts by ordinary people in every job role, regardless of title, that have to be taken to make the difference for units of government.
Absolutely. And we are just so fortunate today to be joined by an extraordinary person. As treasurer, I'm the chief investment officer or CIO, but we've got more than one CIO in Indiana. Tracy Barnes is the state of Indiana's chief information officer, and he started in March of 2020. And as state CIO, he is responsible for the management, implementation, and usability of information and computer technologies across state government. Welcome, Tracy. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Treasurer Mitchell. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very proud of you all for having this series and trying to help put this information out there. I think one thing that we've all continued to learn throughout the years here is that collaboration on this topic is going to be our main conduit to protecting ourselves and each other. So kudos to you guys for putting this series together.
So happy to support the efforts, and it's great to see you again, Tracy. I'd love to set the stage for those who don't know you, who are watching or listening. Would you give us a short background of what brought you to the role?
Yeah, I'll do that. Be pretty brief about that, but I started my career in the private sector and did consulting across the world, actually, for about 15, 16 years. Butler University grad, so kind of homegrown from that perspective. And traveled around the U.S. to probably 40 to 50 different universities and government entities, as well as over in England, helping set up large-scale systems and solutions before coming back home to Indiana and really kind of keeping along that path and such. And had my own company for about 12 years doing that consulting work and helping entities. And Was able to get lucky enough around 2015 to connect with our now Lieutenant Governor, and came over to join her on the state side and working with her in the auditor's office. Continued that up through her time in the Lieutenant Governor's office, and serendipitous how things work out. Is, I mean, this is not a path that I've laid out or could have anticipated or expected, but lo and behold, here I am back in technology, again taking over in mid-March timeframe of this year. A very pivotal time in technology that has been very exciting and very challenging all at the same time. So it's been a whirlwind of a year and a career for me, but very excited to be able to do something that I am so passionate about when you talk about the tech space and the connection to the everyday lives of Hoosiers and citizens. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds culminating together.
Oh my goodness, Tracy. We touch again on that fact that you started in this position in March of 2020. I mean, I think we could do an entire podcast episode on that alone.
Oh, absolutely. I literally started Monday the 16th, and it was that evening that the stay-at-home order was going into effect.
Wow.
So it was, I still haven't had a chance to meet my entire team. We have a pretty good footprint here, but our team has been amazing in helping understand the capabilities and possibilities to support the stay-at-home needs and the work-from-home opportunities across the state. So it's been interesting. But I kind of feel like I've talked to folks, it's kind of been like dog years where, 8 months in a pandemic versus 8 years of real world, you know what I mean? Is you figure out real quick.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, I think Kelly, I'd love to have you in for, just even a brown bag on how you the test of leadership and how you come in and lead a large organization through a very pivotal time. Yeah, having to do all that remotely, that is amazing. That is truly amazing. Wow.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and not only just a test of leadership, but just your role as a statewide leader in this space has to be so different because you started in March 2020 versus March 2019.
Very true. I mean, you definitely hit the nail on the head there. I mean, this is, we plan for emergencies and disasters and catastrophes that truly, take things out and disable things. We don't plan for how do we keep being productive when it's merely a matter of, a health issue that we can't be around each other. And so the state as a whole, we in IoT had been doing some piloting on different tools and technologies as of last fall, like this Teams tool that we're using here. And so we had been starting to vet some ideas and concepts and trying to get some agencies and support and awareness. But it's very different when you're focused on, the 3 buildings downtown that we often talk about versus, the 30,000 homes that individuals are working out of today. It changes the landscape significantly, and it has to totally change the mindset with how we go about determining how we put protections in place and how we keep folks working safely. You look at our footprint, and I know you guys have a pretty decent staff as well. I mean, how big is your staff over at the treasurer's office?
Oh, it's surprisingly not that big. However, we run between 28 and 30 across all of the work that we do. But at one point in time, we were just about 100% remote. Now we probably are about 75% remote for most of the time.
So yeah, so even with that, I mean, that's no matter the big or small. I mean, the vulnerabilities are still there. You think about the devices that you use at home to get connected to the internet. I mean, they're all vulnerable pieces of equipment that we don't have control of, or even have to some extent some level of visibility into.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you have to do specifically in your approach, knowing that there was just so much that wasn't in your control?
There's a couple of different things. I'd say the 2 biggest pieces were really heavy on education. Getting people to understand that they now have to have some major involvement in helping us protect them. So we sent out significant notifications of making sure that you're Comcast or AT&T or your modem or wireless router was as current as possible and updated. And of course, we have tools in place that would notify us when folks would attempt to come in that were not, and we would work with them separately. But also some policy changes that we've had to talk through and figure out. You look at something as innocent that when we're in the office we don't think about. I'm printing off a form that may have a piece of protected information on it in a controlled building versus letting you print that at home.
Oh, sure.
And it ending up in your home trash, or as a post-it note or the note card for something else. How do we continue protecting that data? And those are all pieces that we've had to have some very long and involved conversations and plans for.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So you come into that, your first week on the job, welcome to the job. You're dealing with a once in a century pandemic, Tracy. And now, just not the bearer of bad news, but bring up more bad news. I mean, we saw, recently, earlier in the month of December, one of the state's key third-party cybersecurity vendors got hacked. Even more recently, obviously, the nation as a whole is looking at a potential cyber attack of very large proportions. Can you share more about, maybe just for the state folks, kind of the event that affected the state, and anything you'd like to share, I guess, about this more recent event?
Sure, definitely. I'm actually very glad you brought this up. I mean, this is one that we could, try to gloss over and act like it didn't happen, but it's we're still at the starting point with trying to understand the full scale of what's going on here. And it's not just we here at the state. This is going to be a global investigation and analysis to really understand the core components and the techniques that were used. I mean, the conversations I've been having with various vendors is this has been the most impressive techniques and utilized ever in the level of cyber espionage. It started literally about a week and a half ago with FireEye announcing that they had been compromised. FireEye does provide some different tools for the state here that focuses on kind of that frontline protection. But as you dig into it more, the FireEye compromise was a little more controlled in that, at least to date, what they've acknowledged as being impacted was what they call their red team tools, their testing tools. So as a cybersecurity consulting company, they actually build, for lack of a better phrase, hacking tools to test to see how secure an entity or one of their customers is. Those were the tools that were compromised. It wasn't their protection tool. So there's definitely a little bit of comfort there. But as we all know, we'll continue learning more and more about this as time goes on. But as you saw over the last week and a half after the FireEye came out, the federal government announced a significant volume of additional breaches over the weekend. And it all has so far culminated back together between FireEye and the government as a whole, being the result of another third-party company called SolarWinds and their equipment being compromised. And you talk about, this is where I start turning into a little bit of a geek here, and I'll try to not go too deep, but you talk about impressive concept. That they were able to identify and put some malicious malware inside of a commonly used device. And I think the impressive piece to it wasn't that they knew they were going to get to the federal government or to FireEye. They just put it out there to see where it would end up.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And that concept right there just shows you the level of thinking and the level of mindset that's going behind. It's because we know we want information and we know people are likely going to buy this. Let's just put it out there and see what happens. And so that's the concern is while you may not have been a direct target, and we all try to protect and prevent that situation, that scenario from happening. It's the innocent, devices or extra components that are out there that we all have to. Everyone has to be more diligent about from the top down and understanding how those vulnerabilities can be presented.
No, absolutely. It makes me think of a moment in War College where I may have mentioned this in an earlier podcast, Mark, but where there was, we basically were in an auditorium with a big movie screen, and all the movie screen said was "Nothing is safe," and huge letters, and it's just so scary. But Tracy, really, it's a testament to your leadership that you're out in front on this. What impact are you seeing this having on our local governments?
Well, yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. And again, impressive and kudos to you guys for having these types of podcasts and putting this information out there. They're the folks that I think are equally vulnerable. While their size and scale may not often, present them as targets, their continued connectivity and working with state governments and federal governments and other entities definitely provide them a potential to be on those lists for those bad actors. The FireEye equipment and SolarWinds equipment, there's no question that it's going to be proliferated throughout government entities as well as private sector and commercial entities across the state. And there's a lot of concerns with, do we continue using these tools and do we continue leaving these applications and systems up and running in our environment? There's kind of mixed opinions on that. You look at FireEye and it's a very crucial piece, not just FireEye as a product, but any frontline defense technology right now. It is very crucial to have those as current as possible and leave those operating in as strong a way as you can in your networks and in your environments. The positive thing when you look at what FireEye has done specifically is the minute they identified that they had a compromise, they started putting countermeasures and updates in place to address that and protect from that. So to disable that piece of equipment makes you even more vulnerable and more of a concern. So you want to find ways to keep that in place and keep that one moving. SolarWinds, on the other hand, there's still a lot of information coming out. There was just another notice posted about an hour or so ago. So they're still trying to determine the scale on their side. So quarantining those devices and machines, identifying, activities and other communications that may look innocent in your logs, but folks need to start really doing some research and investigation to determine if they have been impacted and to what level. As you may have seen just recently, 3 states have come out saying that they were impacted, and another city has announced that they were impacted, as well as probably about 8 or so federal agencies that have all put themselves out there. So we'll continue to see this growing, I'm sure, over the weekend and the next week or so. But going into the holidays here, this is not the time to cut back and slack on protection.
So Tracy, I think that's really important for our listeners. So just to help me repeat it back and make sure we got that. So FireEye, if you've got the FireEye, make sure it's updated, that you've installed the latest version or the new countermeasures. I'm probably not using the right technical terms, but make sure that's up and don't turn it off, don't delete it, because kind of ironically that they found the vulnerability, they've got the most up to date.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
you said it right.
And the SolarWinds, like those devices, keep those quarantined. Is there anything else that folks should do locally if on SolarWinds? I mean, just kind of keep those devices separate, check the logs. I think you mentioned that, like just go back and look for kind of suspicious communications.
Definitely, and that's where reporting starts to become a really big need. Is if you're looking and thinking that there may be a concern on the SolarWinds side, reach out to Homeland Security at the state level or even at the Fed level. And let's get some communications going so we can maybe help identify if there's a concern that needs to be addressed. We're trying to find ways to provide resources, whether it's staffing or people or other third parties that can do some analysis. Like I said, we're still trying to understand the full scale of the compromise, but you don't want to wait till you hear all the information before you start looking. So let's start looking now, and let's start reviewing that information so that we can be prepared.
And Tracy, can I just ask a quick question about that? I think we all use the word quarantine a lot in 2020, and this seems obviously different. By quarantining, what is it? What does that mean in this arena?
In this realm, you look at quarantining. When a machine, it actually is a very similar definition. Is if a machine is infected or has the ability to have been infected, you isolate it. You try to manage and limit the connections to it. You you socially distance that machine from your other machine.
Yeah.
I know that's not funny, and it's not something we should laugh about with what we've been dealing with and going
Yeah.
through. But it's a very, very analogous concept there that you limit the ability for that infected machine to have an impact and infect others.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else you want to share on that side of on FireEye and on the bigger breaches, Tracy? I know there's other stuff we can surely talk about. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on there.
No, I think that about covers it for now. It may be some more information that we're trying to keep pushing information out from our side and keeping our websites updated and our distribution lists and such to keep people aware. But definitely stay tuned and if anything you hear from this conversation is let's take this serious, because this is a legitimate concern and problem. And the reports that are being put out there, the bad actors are they're not done.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we're talking about this. I mean, you know what I mean? Not glad that it's happening, glad that we're talking about it, because I think sometimes what frustrates me is we hear about some breaches, we don't hear about others. And for instance, the Hancock County Regional Hospital breach, they really used theirs as a teaching tool, and they chose transparent leadership. But sometimes it just seems like you hear rumors and there's not really a clear understanding of what happened. And maybe that's just me, but it just seems like there's not a standard way we all approach these events.
No, it's definitely not just you. I mean, you've once again hit on a really important topic that that somehow we have to find a way to address. I mean, there's a couple ways we can look at this, right? You know, like you, I also sit on a national committee. It's the National Association of State CIOs, NASCIO, and this is a very common topic that we're all looking at because we all know what the potential is and the vulnerabilities, and the fact that we are direct targets. You know, we have a lot of protected information, a lot of sensitive data, and a lot of systems, especially when you look at healthcare and unemployment and transportation. There's a lot of activity and applications that run through us, and so there's the collaboration has not always been there. The communication has not always been there, and so we got to find ways to get there to be more open communication, which is challenging, because it's the more I'm talking about what I have in place and what I'm doing, the more vulnerable I may be making myself.
Right.
So there's got to be that balance to help us help each other and find the ways to share data, share information, and the more we can start pulling that in, the better we can be. You know, here in Indiana, you know, it all depends on what type of problem you have. You talk about the Hancock County situation, the Hancock Hospital. I mean, it's if you have a true breach and there's a loss of data, you call the Attorney General's office. If you are looking to file a report and try to help get some action done on a potential bad actor, you reach over to state police. If it's a significant breach and you're not really sure what to do, you know, the Homeland Security, National Guard have people that can come in and help. And there may be times when you know, it's truly identified to some level that it's an international situation, and then there's the question of, do I bring in the FBI or higher level organizations to try to help make it happen? And so it's as a victim, how do I figure out in the midst of my chaos, what do I do? I mean, it's the bureaucratic nightmare that you know, we all are not a fan of, but we know it exists, and we're trying to find ways to address.
Wow. And so I didn't hear your office in that. Like, where are you, your team? Is there a report that, to Kelly's point, that eventually makes its way to you? So there's some kind of overall tracking system?
And that's and it's not. You know, I kind of stutter to say that, but unfortunately it's not.
Okay.
We may get pulled in at times to bring our tech resources to the table to help investigate and interrogate and address a situation, or to try to help mitigate a problem and close doors. We've had a couple locals that have reached out to us asking for insight and thoughts on addressing a situation. But there's nothing that's prescribed with, you know, we need to let IoT know, and that's unfortunate. But that's something we're hoping to find some ways to address.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think if we all learn more about these things that happen, then we can get better, right? We can to turn these into learning events would seem to be really important.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is if we can start collecting information and sharing it back out better and quickly, can we not protect other entities around from that same breach? You know, it's you know, you look in your neighborhood, and if you know your house is broken into, do you let your neighbors know, hey, I've had someone come into my house? You guys make sure you're locking your doors and keeping your garages shut and such. And so it's the community approach to protection and safety. We have to get to that same mindset. And that's where, you know, you look at, so we have if you ever heard of the Indiana ISAC, it stands for ISAC, the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's a local division of the MS ISAC, which is a national group that's primarily overseen by Federal Department of Homeland Security. And MS is for multi-states. And it's what they're doing is on a regular basis, pushing as much information as they have on concerns and of threats out to the local ISACs, which what we are doing is trying to do what we can to push it out even further to make sure that more folks are aware of known threats and known vulnerabilities that are out there. I mean, it's not just about cyber, it's about, you know, true overall emergency preparedness and protection. And so the cyber piece has definitely continued to grow. But literally, you know, is if community A gets hit with, you know, a specific type of ransomware attack, we'd be better off knowing that so we can let communities B, C, and D around them know quickly, be on alert, be prepared, know that while you may not think you're a target, this is definitely something that's been actively seen in your area, and start getting your defenses, making sure your defenses are strongly in place.
So Tracy, the IN-ISAC, IN-ISAC, as you said, is that something that is available? Is it something that local units may already have, and as they're listening, nodding their heads, or is that something that they may not know about and need to be checking?
It probably all of the above. You know, we put information out there, and you know, it's hard to get to everybody. And you know, you guys all know what the regular changes that happen in administrations across municipalities. But it's definitely out there. We have our website that you guys can go to, and I'll make sure we get that posted. But there's a lot of good information that we're regularly pushing out, and there's some training as well that we try to put out there to help support the communities in their preparedness and in their awareness opportunity. So I'll definitely make sure we get that link to you guys.
Thank you, Tracy. And yeah, we'll be sure to post that link along with the podcast. So I'd honestly not heard of that resource until now.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, that's you know, we have a lot of better work to do on communication. That's for sure. There's an opportunity.
Well, State Treasurer Kelly Mitchell and I are speaking with State of Indiana CIO Tracy Barnes. Tracy, thanks again for joining the Days of Our Cyber Lives podcast. It's the coolest named podcast you'll be joining this year, without a doubt.
You got that right.
You were just telling us about IN-ISAC, which is loving those government acronyms. As a publicly available dashboard. So where local governments can see not just cyber attacks, but other threats that have occurred so they can be prepared. It sounds great. You know, I was thinking though, you know, as you and Kelly were discussing, like it's true that there's not really any kind of comprehensive system, certainly on the state side. It seems a little bit patchwork. Again, not to downplay it, it's a great resource, but just wondering if it seems like it's kind of either not getting reported. If it is, it's getting reported kind of in a patchwork fashion.
Very true. I mean, it's, there's statistics out there that say that only 15% of cyber electronic crimes or cyber attacks are being reported. And that's what's happening on individuals and businesses and education entities, hospitals, and the like. So there's a huge delta with making sure we're getting some good awareness as to what the real level of problem is that's out there. And that's where, I'm trying to figure out some ways from my seat and from my position to help fix that. So coming up in this next year, I got some pretty big priorities that I'm wanting to get accomplished. And one of them is finding a way, as Treasurer Mitchell asked, how do I get IoT involved in that conversation? How do I get IoT aware of that information? And how can we be in the best position to gather it, collect it, keep putting more information out there to help ourselves and help others, and really kind of grow and expand the capabilities of our ISAC that we have in place. And there's a couple big reasons why I want to do that, why I think it's valuable. For one is with the stat of only 15% of reporting, it's almost impossible to know what the true scale of the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And without knowing the scale of the problem, you can't begin to ascertain the scale of resources needed for the solution. And so I want to start with gathering that information. I'd love to start helping, put some, we're working on some legislation that we can hopefully put out there that require some reporting to us so that we can hopefully at the end of 1 year see what that true scale looks like or have a better picture of that scale. And I mean, I'd love to be wrong and see that we don't have the level of problem that may be out there, and that we may be, currently equipped to support it. But I'm gonna anticipate that it's gonna be the opposite, and we're gonna have to see some ways to understand a better, broader picture so that I can hopefully push to identify additional resources and additional tools and techniques that we can put out there to help the locals and such. And the other piece that hopefully comes out of this is we start streamlining the bureaucracy of reporting and of communication so that as communities are impacted, because we all know it's not a matter of if, but really when they are impacted, there's a quicker process and workflow to getting them engaged and getting them some help and support, and that they're not stuck in the confusion of reporting hell trying to get the information over to all the interested parties to be addressed. So a big lift and a big ask. I think it's much needed, and I think you've seen, from other states and federal levels, the cybersecurity tech space starting to grow as a true policy concern and initiative and need, and I don't think it's out of line for us to start trying to do that same thing here.
Yeah, the vision totally makes sense. I mean, it's hard to solve a problem if you can't really identify. If 15% of it's only visible and the other 85 is unknown, that's hard. And I think our listeners should, be very excited to hear that, just more resources, the more you can learn about it, the more it's easier to deploy resources out around the state, which is fantastic. I heard you mention, I think, a legislative solution or legislative tool possibly to help get there. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what you have in mind? Is it for this legislative session, I assume, Tracy?
Yeah, that's the plan. So, we all know how legislation works, and it can often be a bad word, but, it also helps to, shape policy and change the behavior. And this is something that is important enough that we felt it made sense to go this route, especially because, again, we're talking about broader than the 3 buildings of downtown Indianapolis. So we've been working with AIM and AIC and a couple other outside organizations. We've had a lot of good conversation with the recognition and understanding of the state's concern and need to be more engaged and involved. And in capacities, find ways to be more centralized with it. You guys have some real good things going on with your office, with the local treasurer's offices and folks that you interact with. The Secretary Lawson and her office has a lot of good activities and connections at the clerk levels, and the same with Auditor Klutz and even the Lieutenant Governor with her OCRA, Office of Community Rural Affairs, the interactions they have. And so we got to bring all of that together.
Yep.
And wanting to try and start getting a good group and a good entity in place to lead that charge. And again, it has to start with us being aware and being informed. And so we do have a piece of legislation that's on the docket and starting to move forward. Don't have a bill number yet, just been reviewing the preliminary drafts at this point, but we'll make sure we get that pushed out there as well. But the goal is to require a 48-hour communication to us of an incident, and it's not about embarrassing or getting privy into the concerns or issues of a municipality, but it's about aggregating that data so that we can make others aware to protect them from similar incidents. It's about quickly getting information out that a vulnerability may exist in tool X, Y, or Z, that folks need to do a quick check and sanity check on their current patch levels and their current resources that are being utilized through tool XYZ. It's truly focused on the information sharing and information gathering side of things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What would you maybe add to that to listeners who might just see this as another mandate from the state?
That's a hard question. I think it's a good question. I would say that it's a necessary mandate. It's a necessary need. It's truly, we are going more and more digital on a daily basis, and society is, government is. I mean, the pandemic we've talked about has forced us to find more ways to keep providing services to citizens, and that's almost been through a exclusively digital approach and format. Online tools and online applications. The more connected we are going to be, the more vulnerable we're going to make ourselves. And so it will feel like a mandate. It may feel like a mandate. It's not. Again, it's not to disrupt business as much as it is to protect the entire state. I look at my job as like I said, not just these 3 buildings, but the 4 borders of the entire state. And that extends down into how do I help the small and local jurisdictions that don't have the same level of experience and expertise and access to resources that we have here in Central Indiana. How do I help protect them? Because ultimately that protects me and protects us. How do I walk over to the governor and give him a report and say, we're safe and we're good, if I don't have a good picture of what's going on across the state? That's the level of attention that this topic needs, and I'm sure anybody who's reading any of the news that's been going on over the last week and so will see this is the call that's being asked for from the federal level. When you look at all of our national security agencies, the organizations like CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Administration under DHS, centralization, collaboration is going to be the key. We have to work together to fight this battle. It's not going to get easier. It's only going to continue getting worse because we are all relying more and more and more on technology on a daily basis. So it may feel like that, and I get kind of blunt when I talk about things like that, and it may feel painful. It's about your neighbors. It's about helping each other. It's about helping the entire state. And so that's where I try to go back to making sure folks see and understand the bigger picture.
I can appreciate that. And as a past local elected official, I think having some clarity on this issue and, some kind of roadmap of where to go would actually be super helpful, and to know what else is happening around the state would also be, to your point earlier of, if our house gets broken into, we're going to tell our neighbors, and then they can be even more guarded or prepared. So I definitely see just tremendous benefit in that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and that's very good feedback. And again, we're trying to get that direct feedback from folks as well. So this is definitely open for conversation, and an opportunity for us to find more collaboration and figure out what those right solutions are. So we'll definitely and gladly accept any feedback and thoughts. And we want to hear from. It's the Lieutenant Governor used to always say is we can't govern from this building downtown here. We got to get to the communities, understand what their needs and their goals are. And so appreciate hearing that perspective from you on that as well.
And it sounds like, just having worked with you, Tracy, before, you live that, and you live the public sector, we're here for the public good, and that spirit of collaboration. If I heard you right, you've reached out and you've had conversations with Association of Indiana Counties, the Accelerated Indiana Municipalities Group. So the fact that you're out front, you're talking with them, the vision is clear. I mean, I think, again, it's reporting stinks. No one likes to report, but it's for the common good, to help drive resources to fight, like you said, a battle that's not going away anytime soon. Seems to make a lot of sense, and it sounds like you're doing it the right way.
Wuellner, that might be the nicest thing you've ever said to me.
Wow.
but I'll take it. I appreciate it. That's for sure.
You'll receive my feedback. Thank you. Yeah. You've been incredibly generous with your time. I know you are very busy in your role, Tracy. So I can't thank you enough for joining us today on the Days of Our Cyber Lives podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate you guys reaching out and including me in this, and anything we can do from our side to help, don't hesitate to let us know.
Oh, I appreciate that. And can we keep you on the short list to come back?
I'd love to. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Fantastic. And so for our listeners, we'll have the IN-ISAC link. I'll get that right maybe by the next podcast, and whatever other resources that we can share for Tracy and for the benefit of the state. Those will be on the Bond Bank website or wherever you'll find this podcast link. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the Indiana Bondcast by clicking subscribe in the podcast platform of your choice. And we love that you keep watching and listening to us.
Yeah, for the Treasurer of State's office, this is Treasurer Kelly Mitchell signing off, and just saying thank you so much to our wonderful guest, State Chief Information Officer Tracy Barnes, for joining us and sharing your truly valuable insight and perspective.
Thank you all as well.
Yeah, thank you. And for the team at the Indiana Bond Bank, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Treasurer, again. Thanks to all of you for tuning into the Days of Our Cyber Lives podcast on the Indiana Bondcast.